So thank you for joining me. My name's Henry Normal, and this is the last in our series of the New Poetry Society. And it's actually my 21st one of these. I've done 10 for the Nottingham Poetry people at the libraries, 3 for the Nottingham Poetry Festival, and 8 now for the Manchester libraries. So really enjoyed them. I hope you've enjoyed some of them. It's very good actually that this last one is my special guest today, because it was him that gave me the idea to do them. So I shall be talking to him about that. He's a poet that I've known for many years, and we used to run a press together years ago. He's been involved in lots of things, very much a children's poet around the country, very famous and well known for that. But also he's the poet laureate for Slade, the band, strangely enough. I'm sure we'll be talking to him about that. And also he was the national, or it may still be actually, the National Football Museum poet laureate or writer in residence. So please welcome my special last guest, Paul Cookson. Hiya, Paul. Can you hear me okay? I think you need to unmute.
There we are. Can you hear me?
That's better. There we go. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Lovely, yeah. Now, so I say you gave me the whole idea of doing these because we did a gig together on Zoom for the North Notts Poetry Festival.
That's right. It's about a year ago, wasn't it? We did an evening chat together.
Yeah, and it was such good fun that I thought I'll do some more. And
it's taken a year to invite me back. Thank you.
Well, you see, because we had a good old hour's worth of chat, I thought I best leave it, because I know you're going to be writing some more poems. I best leave it to the end, and then I can have you back, and you'll have written 365 poems by then.
Yeah, that's right. We were doing a poem a day through lockdown. So yes, but yeah, we had a great chat last time, and it's strange because I've just been involved. Well, the Nottinghamshire Literature Festival is about to go ahead the week after next, so I've been doing some stuff for them this last couple of days as well.
I see. You see, you've not invited me back, but don't you worry. I don't mind about that.
You're on the list.
Good. Now, you've got 3 books. I've got 2 of them here. They're actually 3 books in a series. So you've actually written. There you go. You've got all 3. I got 2 in front of me there. You've written a poem a day all through the lockdown.
Well, that's right. I mean, as you know, when it all started March last year, it was a very, very strange time. And you mentioned that I do a lot of work in schools. Well, I did a lot of work in schools, and suddenly that just stopped. Schools closed, and I had nowhere to go, nowhere to be, and I suddenly had time on my hands. And Chris Riddell, who's an illustrator, who's the Children's Laureate for a couple of years, and I noticed he was doing a political cartoon a day. Yeah. And put them online. I thought, well, I could do a poem a day. I actually started, I think it was the Friday after the first Thursday clap for the NHS. That was the first poem I wrote. Yeah. Then I wrote one every day. So when I went back and fictitiously wrote 3 for the first 3 days.
Oh, did you? Right. Okay. Yeah. You caught up with yourself.
I caught up. Yeah. But actually, it was through your good self that I got in touch with Paul at Flapjack, and I must admit it. And I've apologised to Paul since. It was probably one of the most cursory and sort of emotionless emails I've ever sent to a publisher that said, "Dear Paul, Henry's put me in touch. I usually write poems for kids. I've been doing this, a poem a day for the COVID. Would you be interested?" I remember it was the Thursday before Father's Day. Yeah. And it was a Thursday morning, and he emailed back in the afternoon saying, "Hi, Paul. Nice to hear from you. Yeah. Give me a ring on Monday. We'll have a chat." And on the Monday after Father's Day, I remember sitting in my little office downstairs, and he rang me and said, "Yeah, let's do a book." And that's what eventually became this book, and then eventually became that book. Yeah. Eventually became that book.
So there's about 100 poems in each book. Is that right?
Yeah, just over. And then later on this year is going to be the 4th one.
Going to be the fourth one. Bloody
Yeah.
hell. Yeah. So are you going to stop, or are you going to keep doing it for the rest of your life, a poem a day?
Well, I don't know. I'm frightened if I stop, I'll never do it again. That's the worrying thing, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, up until such time that A, I don't have anything to write about, or B, I'm so busy that I can't write, I'm going to try and write something every day.
Right.
And I think what I'm trying to do as well, I've been trying to write shorter ones.
Yeah.
You know, because there's only so much you can write about Boris being rubbish or COVID or whatever, and you know, I've covered that ground. And those are the gifts that keep on giving, because it started off as a COVID diary and responding to news situations. Then it became my diary. So that the second and third books are a lot more personal and probably better for it, actually, to be fair.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, it's what happens to you in the day, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not necessarily what happens, you know, outside in the world. And I know that you put them on Facebook, because I follow you on Facebook, and I read them in the morning, and Twitter as well.
Yeah, Twitter and if I remember, Instagram. I'm not as good on Instagram, but I mean, one of the things that, I mean, it started as a Facebook thing because I had nowhere else to share them, and it was interesting because, you know, as a performer, you know, when you read something out for the first time and you get a response to it, you get that applause or the laughter in the right place, or that silence and that thoughtfulness afterwards, and you miss that. And like I say, from you know, spending every day in front of 300 children in a primary school making them laugh or whatever, to suddenly having no audience. So Facebook became the audience, and it gradually built up this little community of people who respond on it, some of them on a daily basis, which is
absolutely. Now, Paul, for those who haven't seen you before, let's start with a poem.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I'll read out the first poem I wrote in this series, the one I was talking about.
That's good. That
seems like it's not the first one in the book, but it is the first one that I wrote for this series. And yeah, from this book here, Fighting Talk. So no, actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to read out the first one, the one I went back to. Yeah. Chris Riddell, I mentioned, does the illustrations, and some of you will recognise his style. But so, yeah, depressing illustration to start with, but you know, the day the world stood still. More than just trouble at mill. More than flu to make it ill. More than a virus, it will kill. The day the world stood still. No quick fix, no magic pill. Vaccination numbers nil. Feel the fear. Fear the chill, the day the world stood still. Now we've got time to fill. Gonna be a long, long time until we do those things we know we will. The day the world stood still. This is the day. This is the day. This is the day the world stood.
Very nice. Thank you. And I think it's an amazing achievement. I couldn't write a poem a day, to be honest with you.
Well, it's strange, and I've always got to do it in the morning. If I leave it in the afternoon, I feel that the day's gone. So sometimes I will prepare the night before, and especially if you know, I've got a busy day, you write a haiku or a couple of lines or a ditty or something. But other times things happen, you think, well, I've got to write about that, or you know, and they turn into sort of real long rhyming things, and you end up writing things you'd never written before. Like there's one in this one about the goats of Llandudno. Did you read that story?
No.
Early on in lockdown, it said that in Llandudno, which is pronounced Llandudno, but I didn't know that at that time, which is a poem in itself. But
you didn't know about Dunno.
Exactly, yeah. So, but the goats had overtaken Llandudno because, you know, the streets were crowded, and then that story reappeared about March time of this year. And you know, they said the wild goats are back, and because of COVID, there hadn't been goat contraception apparently, and so they were overrunning. Yeah. So anyway, I'll read this one out for you, and this was just an exercise in finding how much I could make rhyme with Llandudno, because it's not a rhyme that suggests itself. So, they're filling the streets instead of the cars, standing outside all the shops and the bars. Here's a fact that everyone should know. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. There's a storm from way up in Orme, quite clearly. It's the appearance of all these Kashmiri. Kashmiri, by the way, is the type of goat they are. The breed of these creatures that very few could know. The The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Hedges and bushes and flowers and leaves, nothing is safe from the munching of these. Beasts who are feasting on much more than wood, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Not just the greenery, blossoms and plants, washing line thievery, dad's underpants, so much more than chewing the cud, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Invading the churches, the parks and the schools, not acting the goat, the nobody's fools. Just check your shoes for where you are stood, though. The wild goats are back on the streets of Llandudno. Sowing wild oats, its natural selection. Thanks to COVID, no goat contraception. Could be a movie. Not very good, though. Return of the goats to the streets of Llandudno.
Well done. Do you know what? I love playing with rhyme.
Yeah.
It's such a fun thing to do, isn't it?
Well, especially, I love convoluted rhymes as well. When they work,
Yes.
when they don't work, but work, that's what I like, yeah.
Yeah, no, that always tickles me. So I've written a few poems during lockdown. I've written 2 books as opposed to 4. That's my latest, The Distance Between Clouds. But I tend to soak it in a bit and then see what comes. And I try to write a poem that sort of I can look back on over the years and would sum it up for me. So this is, people have said that we're all in the same boat, which we're not. We're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat.
I like that phrase.
This is called Second Boat Amid the Storm. A second boat amid the storm shouldn't sail too close. Waves are harsh enough without a clash of bows. A second boat amid the storm shouldn't drift in the dark. You may be their only salvation. They may be yours. So I of course, I
do like the fact that you say you look back and want the poem to last. And what I've found with obviously editing these books, looking back, some of the poems are obviously throwaway because they're sort of like little ditties and little jokes about the day. But there's a lot of poems that I thought, well, I wouldn't have written that, A, if I hadn't had the time, and B, we hadn't had this situation. And actually, I'm really pleased that I've written them. And going back to what I was saying before about the
well, they are like a diary, aren't they? Which is lovely. Yeah.
Well, that's the phrase. There's a lady, and she's a friend of my mum's actually, who's a friend of mine on Facebook. She knew me from when I started writing out when I was 16, 17, and she said, "Your diary is our diary, Paul." And I thought I really like that because you then, your job as a poet is like you've done in that wonderful poem there. You reflect the situation we're in. And
if we don't, then the only chronicle we have of the times is the official one. Yeah. So it is nice to have a non-fiction version, isn't it?
Well, one of the quotes on the back of the book is from our mutual friend Ian McMillan.
Oh yeah.
And it said a book that future historians will want to read because it will tell them what it was like to live through turbulent times through a poet's eye. If journalism is the first draft of history, then here is the second draft: life shaped, structured, described, and annotated. And I think that's really nice.
He's got away with words, him. Yeah. As Roger McGough said, he could almost make them talk.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Now, you do so much brilliant work with kids, and I know that you've sold, thousands and hundreds of thousands of.
No. I've sold 1 million children's books.
There you go, million. And that's an amazing figure, isn't it? And I once drove you to some gigs, didn't I, in Nottingham?
Yes.
I can't remember whether you did 3 a day or 4 a day.
Sometimes it was 3, sometimes it was 4. In fact, I looked at that poem. Henry Normal was my chauffeur.
Yeah, well, I was worn out just driving you there, and I love the fact you got up on the stage in front of 50, 100 kids, and just mesmerise them. For I don't know, 40 minutes or something like that, and then did it again, and then did it again, and then did it again. I mean, luckily we weren't driving too far. And your enthusiasm and energy that you put into it, I just thought was gorgeous. You must miss that. Yeah, very much so. And this last, well, I said, the summer half term between sort of May and July, I was lucky enough to get back into schools, and I realised how much I've missed it. Yeah.
You know, because there is something, I mean, you'll know from performing yourself, whatever you're performing, it's that response from an audience, and where you see the audience and you see them engaged, they're either being silent, or in the kids' case, because you know, and this is what I like about what I've been doing recently. I've actually been writing a different style of poetry, but obviously when I'm in front of kids, the aim is to make them laugh and to make them join in.
Yes.
I always say it's like pantomime with better rhymes, and that sort of sums up what I do, really.
Yeah.
You know, it is like he's behind you. No, shout out the next line, join in the actions, have as much fun in a controlled way as possible. And I do miss that. I really miss being in front of the kids. And so last term was really nice to sort of get back. I've enjoyed doing this stuff online, and it's been a different way of working, doing the Zoom sessions online, because you've got to create your own energy, and you can't.
So have you been doing stuff for kids online?
Yeah, I've done some sessions for schools and libraries online, and again, that's different, you know. And I've really enjoyed it, because I've found different ways of working. Because in an audience situation, you feed off their energy. You know, I do something, they join in. I say something, they laugh. They might say something, I think of something new. You know, there's that relationship with the audience, isn't there? And it's almost like stand-up comedy for kids at times. And you know, the introductions to poems get longer because you think of something funny to say, and that works, and you put it in the next show.
So I know the kids are back at school. It's probably been half term just recently, but are you planning? Are you going back? Are you doing stuff for the next term?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things booked in. Not many at the moment. I suspect because schools are only going back today, actually.
Right. Okay.
That in the next week, I've had a couple of teachers contact me saying, you know, book week's coming up, we're doing poetry this term, can you come in? Are you doing schools again? Do you do live visits? Do you do
presumably you have to like wash and wear masks and all that sort of stuff, unless you're performing, of course.
Yeah, to be honest, Henry, I usually wash anyway, so it's not.
Yeah, I know, but you know, wash extra wash your hands. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, I usually wash my hands after I've talked to you. To be honest with me.
It's been interesting. Different schools have had different ways of doing it. Sometimes it's almost been like normal, and other schools they've been in bubbles, and it's just been in their classrooms. So I think this term it'll be a bit more back to normal. But I've got a few booked in.
Now, I was going to have another poem. I just wanted to mention that we've got a chat facility. So halfway through, about 12:30, we'll ask if anybody's got questions, and they can ask you questions.
All right.
We can answer them. So if people get questions ready, and then at about 12:30, I'll put that out there. Let's talk about Slade. Now, I like Slade. And a lot of people like Slade. They're a great band, and I remember having Slade live, which was a great album, and probably showed a different side to Slade than their pop side. They're quite a good, what you might call progressive rock band.
Yeah.
But you've obviously got a very different relationship with Slade. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, in like many people, they were the first, of my age. Slade were the first band I liked. I was born in '61, so in the early '70s, they were like the house band on Top of the Pops, and that was my first rock and roll. I was going to say rock and roll snog, but that'd be better if it was Susie Quattrell, to be honest. But anyway, that's a different matter. But you know what I mean?
Not the older. That's a definite taste.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, they were the first band I ever liked, and I never stopped liking them. And I suppose in those days, your band was like your football team.
They were, yes.
If you liked Slade, you didn't like T-Rex. I mean, I do now. It was Slade, so if you supported Everton, you couldn't like Liverpool or Manchester United, and it was quite tribal. That you like.
I think it was back then. I don't know if it is so much now, but it sort of defined you, didn't it?
Yeah. So Slade were my first band, and I just carried on, and I followed them through thick and thin. They had the lean years in the late '70s, then came back as a faux heavy metal band in the '80s, and then sort of fizzled out in the '90s. So yeah, I even wrote. In fact, I've got it here. I think I've got a book of poems about them somewhere.
Well, I was going to say, so you're the poet laureate for them, and you've actually recorded with Slade, haven't you?
Well, yeah. I was on Mark Radcliffe's show on National Poetry Day about 10 years ago with Noddy Older, and Mark Radcliffe said, "So Nod, when did you know there's a poet writing poems about Slade?" And Noddy said, "He's Slade's poet laureate, you know." So I thought, right, I said it, I'm having it. you know. And I've been to a few conventions and stuff like that. So as you know, because you know, I'm based in Retford now, and we've been doing these before COVID. Obviously, we did these events on a monthly basis, pies, peas, and performances in our church hall. Yeah. And so we'd have poets and songwriters. So we'd have Miles Hunt at the Wonder Stuff, Martin Stevenson, Your Good Self, John Brownwell's been, Mike Peters at the Alarm, whatever. We put a variety of events on over a few years that we've been doing this. And I'd asked Don Powell out of Slade to do a quote for me book of Slade poems. And he you know, I just emailed him through his website. Yeah. And he emailed back, and we just started emailing each other. And I just said, would he be interested in coming over to Retford? Retford, rock and roll way.
Roll capital of the north.
And do an evening. And he said, yeah. He said, it'll have to be a Monday night on such and such a date, because we're playing Butlins in Skegness the day after, because him and Dave Hill were still doing a verse of Slade. Okay. So he came over, and he was fabulous. It was like This Is Your Life. I just asked him loads of questions. He told loads of stories. Yeah. And my friend Les Glover, who's a songwriter, we'd written a couple of sort of like nostalgia-based songs, and Les had performed one. And Don at the end of the night said, I really enjoyed that. Can I come back and do another one? And we said, yeah, of course you can. In the meantime, me and Les wrote a couple of songs, and we said, look, if we record these, any chance that you might drum on them? And he said, yeah, of course I will. And he came over to Retford. Brilliant. And little recording studio, it's about as big as my bedroom, and recorded a couple of songs. And because he was spot on, he got them like first or second take. So we got the studio all day, and he'd done them by like 12:30. He said, you got anything else? And I said, well, I've got a couple of demos. He said, well, let's do those. So we sort of improvised a few others. He said, that's half an album, that, lad. Should we do an album together? We said, well, you've talked us into it. So, yeah, in fact, I've got the T-shirt on, Don Powell's Occasional Flames.
Oh, that's what they call Don Powell's Occasional Flame. And
that's the CD that's just come out.
So you can buy it as CD. And are you on the internet if somebody wants to check out the
Yeah, if you go on Bandcamp, you can go and listen to it free on Bandcamp or downloads. We've not put it on iTunes.
You've gone with the kids now. I don't know Bandcamp. What's that then? Are you not on YouTube for the oldies?
Oh, we've got a couple of videos on YouTube, yeah. There's a couple of things on Spotify and iTunes, but we've put this on Bandcamp, which is another streaming service, but gives more money to the artists.
Okay.
So, we are going to put it out, because we've got a vinyl version of this coming out in
brilliant
November. So we just got 2 reviews. We've got reviewed in Classic Rock and Viva Rock, both reviews, 8 out of 10. So
you're making poetry the new rock and roll, as they say.
Yeah. So, and what was interesting, both the reviews mentioned the lyrics and the, you know, I won't say the sharpness and the wit, but those words were sort of banded about, and that was nice that it wasn't just the music and Don's name that was getting mentioned. It was
who sings?
Les Glover. So Les is the one in the hat on the left.
Well, I've seen Les, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, Les. When you came to Retford, Les performed.
Yeah, very, very good singer. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, smashing. Now, can you give us another poem?
Yes. One of the you said to ask questions. One of the questions I always get asked is, "What was your first poem?"
All right. Okay.
And I always used to say I didn't know. It was probably about red is the colour of, or autumn, an acrostic from school. Yeah. And going back to the online thing and the poems a day, one of my friends on Facebook is my old primary school teacher, Mrs. Burton. Yeah. And I got invited to my old primary school about 5 years ago. They found out I was an ex-pupil. It was their 60th anniversary. Yeah. And they invited me into the school for a couple of days to do workshops and performances with the kids. And the end of the first day, I got an email, and it said, "Dear Paul, are you the Paul Cookson that was in my class in 1969? Yeah. My granddaughters came on from school today, so we had a poet in." And anyway, it was Mrs. Burton. So we sort of we met up, got in touch. And in fact, I dedicated the first book to her, because she sort of commented on a daily basis, almost really. And I posted something on Facebook. I posted an old, an old topic book from when I was like 5 years old. Yeah. And I found my mum had kept it, and I posted that, and it was the typical thing. It was about boats, and the boats were the same size as the people on the boat, the same size as the fish in the sea. No scale at all. Thick marker pen drawing. But she said, I recognise that the writing. It's Miss Smith, who was my teacher. And then she sent me a poem that she'd kept from when I was 10 years old.
All right.
And I have no recollection of writing it, but she kept it in a collection of work of our class for that year. And I'm still in touch with 3 or 4 lads from my school year.
And you've got that poem, have you, from when you was 10?
Yeah, it was one of my poems a day. So I've actually put it in the book. So, and I've not changed any word of this. So it's exactly as it was written when I was 10 years old. It's called Windmills. One day I saw a windmill there in a field of tulips fair. The tulips, they belong to farms. The windmills all have swinging arms. In a field, bright and gay, one windmill seemed to say, how I wish the wind would stop. My sails are spinning like a top. The sails are spinning in the breeze. The miller grinds the corn with ease. Sometimes fast and sometimes slow. That's the way the windmills go. The sails go merrily whirling round, sometimes nearly touching the ground. All of them belong to farms, those windmills with their swinging arms.
That's great.
Yeah. And Corky Paul has done the illustration, so he did a great illustration. Corky Paul has illustrated Winnie the Witch. In fact, that book there, Fantastic Football Poems, he's illustrated. He's a mate of mine, so he's illustrated this book. Chris Riddell illustrated this one, and Martin Chatterton has done all the covers and illustrated this one. So, and all 3 of them they're going to do a third each on the 4th one.
So I know you've got lots of books for kids. How many books have you actually got out, different titles?
What, over the years?
Yeah.
It's probably about, I think it's over 60.
Over 60 books.
Over 60.
That's
yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
That's the first self-published one I did for kids, Captain Concord.
Because when I met you, you were publishing books, and you published some of my books, which I'm eternally grateful for. And then later on, we formed a small press, and we published some other poets' work, didn't we? Which is very often how it works in the.
We did the Amazing Colossal Press, didn't we?
The Amazing Colossal Press. So we published Pete Ramskill, didn't we?
Yeah. Nick
that's right. Nick Belinda Burton.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to sort of be part of a community and help people along. And I found that in the poetry world that that there is a sort of a sense of community arts about it all.
Yeah. I mean, and especially the children's poetry world as well. I mean, I found it even more so with children's poetry, more than the sort of adult poetry, that people are very supportive of each other. There's an online community, on Twitter or whatever, that if I tweet something about my book, people will retweet it and vice versa. So it's not quite as competitive as other areas of media.
Oh no. I think there's a long game with poets, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? I mean,
the older you are, the better you get, to be honest.
Well, yes, I don't. Not many people remember jokes from 600 years ago, but we still remember Shakespeare.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a long game is the way to look at it. But I love the sense of community, and I know there's a sense of community within Nottinghamshire, and I know there's, as you say, a sense of community on the internet. And as I meet poets going around the country, because sometimes you're on the same bill, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's very nice to sort of find that there's a sort of almost a soldiers in arms sort of feeling to it, and certainly you and I who've been 30 years at least in the game, you do get to see quite a few other people, up and down the country, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the fact that you're in Retford is strange, isn't it? That you might feel, and this is quite a strange thing with that you were on the edge of things, but strangely enough, nowadays everywhere is the centre of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never heard of Retford before I moved here. I came here because I got a teaching job. I started as a teacher in a secondary school, and I was full time for 5 years. And it was actually through one of the teachers, the wonderful Audrey Clifford, who taught at Elizabethan, and she used to do a day of diversions. And that's when I first met you, because you came along and was one of the guests on that day. And I think she had me comparing it. And I remember sitting in the bar afterwards, and we talked, and I got a couple of my self-published books out, and you said, "Oh, how do you do those?" I said, "Well," and I remember because I published them because a friend of mine from college, his brother-in-law worked at the RSPB in the print room, and he got the books done ridiculously cheap because we did Love Like Hell, and he did the wrong number. We put 500, he did 5,000. Do you remember that? You had 5,000 of those books. I was forever picking them up from Bedford and then dropping them at your flat, you know.
Hey, I tell you what, though, Paul, they've all gone.
Yeah. Well, there was that toilet paper shortage this last year, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, that's they got rid of the last few. Now I'm going to read you a poem that I know touches upon something that is close to your heart. So this is one of my poems a day. You know, sort of in my sort of on-off diary. It's called Ladders of Divine Ascent, and because I've got a house next to the sea, I can look out over the sea, and so obviously the sky and the sea feature quite a bit in some of my poems. It's called Ladders of Divine Ascent. Light tilts from the clouds like an alien abduction. Snow threatens as smoke rises from neighboring roofs. On this ordinary morning, set mostly in monochrome, spotlit, the sign, the sea shines silver, the winter sky stretches wider, whilst earthbound, I concede to wonder and dream of angels. And I know that...
I love the fact that, you know, when we first met, you probably wouldn't have written that poem.
No, because I was writing for a sort of an audience whereby it was like I was touring with bands, and it was very much an audience that wouldn't listen to something like. It
was like, you know,
although I still wrote poems for myself back then, but I wouldn't perform them.
Because I remember having a conversation with you saying that, you know, I enjoyed those poems more than the ones you were doing. So and it's almost like you've come full circle and you've returned to those with the stuff you've been doing recently, which is brilliant.
Well, I think if it's something you write for yourself, it has some sort of worth, if only to you. But I know that spirituality runs through your work, and there's something that you know a lot of your daily poems. There's a sense of morality to them, and you know I think you're very clearly defined that you know you want the world to be a better place.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting, again, looking back on the poems that I started writing at the beginning of lockdown. They started off sort of quite, I won't say ambivalent, but sort of not judgmental. And then you get more, obviously, you know, I found myself getting more cynical, and then I have to sort of rein that in a little bit. And but there is a sense of, you know, this seems right and this seems wrong. And I say, yeah, spirituality. I mean, I was brought up in a church family. I always say my mum and dad were BBC Methodists. You know, in the sense that we got Look and Learn and not the Beano, and you know, and we watched Blue Peter and not Magpie, and it was Swap Shop and not Tiswas, and Grandstand and not World of Sport. You know, So in fact, I was 60 a couple of weeks ago, and my brother bought me 2 years worth of Look and Learns from 1970 and 1971. I thought he found them in the garage, and I thought it was a cheap present, but he got on eBay and bought them. And it was interesting. The first one I opened was a page I remember drawing, because I'd set our kitchen table and copy draw things, and it was a picture of Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty fighting on a waterfall. But yeah, so I've always been brought up, and I've carried on going to church throughout my life, really. And I said, you know, I've got a faith. I think that faith, people always think it's certain. I think it wavers from time to time, but I think it's always there at some point.
Well, what I've noticed in the poems is you don't hit it head on, but it's always there in the background.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm what I call an atheist agnostic, in that I'm not sure that God doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I like to edge my bets a little bit. Now, we're going to go to
I
ask some
don't
questions.
think there's any merit in sort of forcing any views down anybody's throat. I mean, you put things out there and people take what they want from them.
No, no, but you know, it's worth in your internal dialogue searching and making some decisions every now and again. Now, I'm going to read a little questionnaire that we've got. And if anybody's got a question for Paul, do shout out. Here we go. So it says, you talked about the pandemic guidelines in schools. Some of my friends or ex-friends are anti-vaxxers. That's probably why they're ex-friends. Are there poets in the poetry community who have very different opinions from you both? And if so, how do you manage that? This is from Mirabelle.
I've not come across many people who have wildly differing views in the poetry world. I mean, there's a few musicians I've come across who, where I've done events, and they have differing views. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so not so much in the poetry world, but I did an event for the Words in Music Festival in Nantwich recently, and there was one artist who, when he got there, wouldn't perform because there were perspex screens and had to be and stuff like that. I'm not going to mention the name at all, but because that would be not very nice. But and that was difficult, and I found that difficult because he's a friend of mine, and he reacted in a way that I wouldn't have done, you know.
Yeah. No, I've found all the poets that I've ever come across, and most creatives, I would say. I mean, there are some in the world of television that are a bit up themselves, but most creatives I've ever met are quite reasonable people.
Yeah.
And I think the whole idea of empathy and the way that we create is often through empathy, is that you're imagining what the other person thinks and you're trying to communicate so that you have something in common with somebody else. That if you open yourself up to empathy, I think it veers towards being sort of generally more considerate. Yeah. Rather than, you know, sort of bolshy, shall we say. I was trying to think of a nice BBC word. It's quite funny. I was listening to Word of Mouth with Michael Rosen last night. After I've loaded the dishwashers, I always have about half an hour to myself. So I listened to Ian McMillan's shows on 3, and I catch up with Michael Rosen's Word of Mouth, and he was on about accents, and he was saying how people judge you from accents. And so you actually got a quite a soft Preston accent, haven't you? Because that's where you were brought up.
Yeah, well, you can't tell from my accent. I was actually born in Essex, but I was adopted.
All right.
Yeah, Chelmsford. Yeah, but I was adopted when I was, you know, less than 2 months old or whatever, and taken up to Preston, just outside Preston. So yeah, it's interesting because I was.
You weren't put up the chimneys, were you, Paul?
Sorry,
you weren't put up the chimneys, were you?
No, that was the generation before me, so I got away with that. But yeah, so I've got a sort of Lancashire accent, but I think accents are interesting anyway, because they're, you know, sometimes it's Paul Cookson who writes books, you know, different. Sometimes it's Paul Cookson who writes books. I mean, I'm Paul Cookson who writes books, but you can go 10 miles away. Oh, it's Paul Cookson who writes those books, doesn't he? You know, sit down, everybody, you know, and it's that sort of round. Yeah, so I've got a Lancashire accent, yeah.
Yeah,
but I think accents.
I mean, you not necessarily that aware of your own accent, are you?
No, until you go somewhere else.
No, you see, yes, it's when you're talking to somebody who has a different accent that it becomes pronounced. But I certainly wouldn't shy away from it. The whole idea of me trying to pretend that you know, some of my poems don't rhyme unless they're in a Nottingham accent. So
well, that's it. Yeah, I found I can rhyme stars with this world of ours. But in other parts of the country, that's not going to rhyme at all. But
no, and laugh and bath.
Of course, yeah.
So of course, Lem Sissay, a good mate of both of ours, talks very openly about his upbringing and everything. Have you ever talked about the nature of being adopted?
I've written about it. I've written poems about because I did find out. I've got a poem. I don't think I've published it actually. It's one of the ones that I haven't published yet. It's called I, Christopher Goldsmith, because that was my birth name, apparently.
Was it really?
Yeah, my brother was looking after my mum and my dad's business. My dad was a chicken. Well, he was a customs excise officer who became a farmer, and then a chicken farmer.
Yeah.
So he got into poultry. Perhaps I couldn't spell. Maybe I just read it as poetry, and maybe that was the thing. I don't know. But my brother was looking after my dad's business, and while mum and dad went on holiday, and he found a tin which he thought was full of receipts and had our birth certificates in. And I've got a brother and 2 sisters, and we're all adopted from different families, so we're not blood relatives at all.
Yeah.
We found our own birth names, but none of us have, to my knowledge, have ever. And I'm pretty sure this is true. None of us have ever looked back into our history and found out who are. And I've never felt the need to do that either.
No.
I'm sort of interested now that I've had kids and now that I'm getting older. When you got the doctors and they say, "Well, have you got a history of whatever it is in your family?" I'm saying, I don't know. There could be a history of heart disease or dementia or whatever it is. I don't know. So maybe I'm sort of interested now, but it's not through any personal need to find out who I really am.
But you know what I find odd, Paul, because is that they would change your first name. I can understand them changing the second name because they'd want their name so I know you as Paul, but your birth name was
Christopher.
So I wonder as when they saw you there, they thought you don't look like a Christopher. It looks like a Paul.
I always wanted to be called Paul Christopher Cookson, but then my mum and dad said, "Well, that'd be PC Cookson. Police Constable Cookson." So
yeah. That's odd that, but you're very well adjusted anyway. As is Lem, strangely enough.
Despite... I mean, Lem's story is much different. I mean, I know that there's a similarity in a sense, but
because he ended up in care, and obviously he's written extensively about that. But still, despite that, very well adjusted. Now we do have time for any questions. If anybody's got any questions for Paul. Do you know, it's lovely talking. Very often when you know somebody, you don't delve into various areas, do you? So it's lovely finding out something about somebody that you know, and finding a different side to them, which is great.
Yeah.
I think we should have another poem, Paul, because we've got. So
I'll tell you what. I'm going to read one from this book here. This is a children's collection called "The Very Best of Paul Cookson."
Okay.
And as we've been talking about the parents, I've got a couple of poems in here that sort of work on that really. And I'm just trying to find one. And this is a true story. And it's called "My Mother Once Spoke to Judy Garland."
Right.
Which is a true story. And I'm going to have to speak a bit longer because I can't find the page it's on. Oh, here we are, yeah. And and I only found this out about maybe 7 or 8 years. My mum was 88 now. So we'd found this out when she was probably, late 70s. As in her late 70s, not the late 1970s. And we just sat on the kitchen table and must have been talking about celebrity. And she said, "Oh, I once spoke to Judy Garland." You're thinking, hang on, that's like saying I once spoke to Elvis.
Yes, yeah.
And she used to work on a telephone exchange in Southport. And I think Judy Garland was doing some theatrical engagement and was asked to put through somewhere. So she was just a telephone operator. Yeah. But it's just the fact that Hollywood and Lancashire connected, really. So, in fact, I'll read a poem before it that sets it up, really.
Okay.
I believe in angels, not those who sit on clouds on high, play harps, have wings that sprout and fly. I believe in angels, not those who dress in gowns of white, beneath their halos gleaming bright. I believe in angels, not those who live in far off heaven, but those unknown who we are given, those who shimmer, those who shine, who put their own lives last in line, those whose wings of love enfold us, those who listen, those who hold us, those whose wisdom is imparted, those who heal the broken-hearted, ordinary angels like gold that's undiscovered. I believe in angels. Have you met my mother? My mother once spoke to Judy Garland, unmoved that she was talking to a star. It must have been the same for Judy Garland. She didn't know just who and what you are. My mother once spoke to Judy Garland, and then she said she'd seen our Auntie Jean. She very rarely mentioned Judy Garland, very rarely watched the silver screen. Always quiet, always strong, never said a word that's wrong. Stayed the same all along, saw the best in everyone because I believe in angels, ordinary angels. Everything she ever did was for the good of others. Time was just a gift that she could give. Last on any list, just like a lot of mothers. That was just the way she chose to live. Nothing had a bad word to say of her. Simple and straightforward in her faith. Judy Garland once spoke to my mother. Two different worlds collide, two worlds far apart. Hollywood and Lancashire rarely met each other. And she didn't really know that my mother was the star. Didn't really know that my mother is the star, one of many shining bright, glowing in the darkest night, signs of hope and guiding light. Yes, I believe in angels, ordinary angels.
Oh, that is gorgeous, that, Paul. Absolutely gorgeous.
And actually, the bit about Judy Garland, as a friend of, and one of my side projects that I've extended a little bit during lockdown, I've been writing words for other people to sing. And there's a friend of mine called Sam Hill, who's a singer-songwriter from Preston, actually. Yeah. And he's turning that one into a song at the moment. I say at the moment, you know, might be this very moment, but that's the project he's working on. So I've been writing words for other people to sing. I've got this project called I'll Be Bernie, You Be Elton, because that's how it works. I'm not sat in anybody's in the same room as anybody writing songs. Even the stuff I write with Les, I often just email him the lyrics and he does something with them. Yeah. So I've got a variety of people, and yeah, I'm writing songs with them, and hopefully that'll turn into a project we release at some point, but we don't know yet.
So do you find it different writing poems to writing songs? Is there like a different muscle, as it were?
Well, I think a poem has to stand up by itself.
Yeah.
A poem, you can't hide behind melody. You know, we all know that there's some great songs that have rubbish words, but they've got great tunes, so you get away with it.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I think it's a different way of writing, and also you're writing for somebody. Sometimes I've written with somebody else's voice in mind, so sometimes they're inflections, but even so, rhythmically, you've got to write quite a strong rhythm if they're going to put it to some sort of music.
Yeah.
You know, so it's got to be quite tight. But yeah, you know, I think I found this lockdown time, I've actually written more than I've ever written before in my life. I've probably redefined myself, I should say, as a writer who writes for adults. Because obviously when we first met,
yeah,
I was performing in the same sort of venues as yourself.
Yeah.
It was the alternative cabaret circuit. So you are going for laughs or sometimes political points. And it was very much that age group. And then we mentioned Ian McMillan, we met Ian. And it was through Ian that I got into the schools work. And then I think I found my voice really as a poet and performer, going into schools, and I'm, you know, and I feel that is my forte, and that's where I really, really sort of blossomed. And I'm probably a better writer for adults now through performing for schools and children. But again, through lockdown, I've had the time to sort of write more about adult things.
Well, I would say, Paul, that you're always a good writer for adults, but you do have the superhuman power to actually write for kids and perform for kids in a way that I you know, of the hundreds of people that I've met that do poetry, you know, I think only an handful could do it in that way. So I wouldn't see, I don't know whether anybody does see writing for kids as lesser than writing for adults. Because I can't write for kids. I find it difficult to because I've, you know, I say my lad is different to most kids, and I'm not sure as I've got the right understanding. Because obviously you don't want to be patronizing, so it's a question of trying to understand the level that you're writing at. But having seen you perform, you have a great and I think it's probably from being a teacher and whatever, but you have a great understanding of how to pitch it and to inspire people as opposed to patronize.
Well, yeah, and I think probably my teaching background comes into it, but I think also the people I sort of like as performers, whether it's poets or comedians or even singer-songwriters, are the people who are warm, the people who think, you know what, I could be their friend. And I think that's really, you know, whether it's Ian McMillan or Mike Harding or yourself, or do you know what I mean? You know, Eric.
Strangely enough, in the 80s, being warm was not the fashion.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
That's why.
It was more your sort of people with attitude, weren't it?
Yeah.
You know, it was and being offhand and being aloof. So we were of a different era. Probably before the 80s and after the 80s, but not actually the 80s.
That's probably why I never really felt that was my forte, because you had to be angry and political and edgy and a bit sweary, and that's not me, and it's not really you. And like I say, I think finding the schools, I thought, yeah, I'm a better performer now because of that. You know, I think if you go into schools, if you went into schools and did some poems for a term, you'd find those that work and those that don't. And then you'd find yourself writing things, you think that's got to work in that situation. Yeah. And I found myself writing a brand new set of material for schools. And the ones I thought were good poems aren't always the best ones that work in performance. Because it's the ones that have a laugh or the ones that are obvious because they've got to understand them for the first time. And I don't think it's true that anybody can write for kids. I think people think they can. And I think you just think, oh, I just need to dumb it down and say the word bottom. Now, there's nothing wrong with the word bottom or the word knickers. I've made a living out of that. But you've got to say it at the right time and in the right way and not too much and have a variety of stuff. And I do think that most people think I mean, you know, there's a lot of celebrities who write books for kids now, and some of them are good, but some of them aren't. And
I think it's a definite skill and a separate skill, shall we say? It's a different skill to writing for adults, and you've mastered both, which is great. So you know,
I think that somebody's once said, you know, or it might have been me who said it, and I'm quoting myself. I can't remember, but I think most children's writers can write for adults.
Yeah.
But the converse isn't true. Most adult writers couldn't write for children. No. But think they probably can, you know. But I think there's a different skill set, and it is finding that pitch that you know, you're challenging them, but also you're the friend. There's a lot of laughter, as you know, in the performances that I'm involved with.
Oh yeah, and as you say, a lot of getting them involved in all sorts of different ways. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's, you know, we're laughing at ourselves. There's as many jokes about myself as there are jokes about the children. And it, you know, one of my techniques, I'll make jokes about the names. And I used to be a bit wary about that. And then there's kids going, do a joke about my name. Go on, make a joke about my name. And they all want to be involved and they like it. And it's that thing, you know, banter's an overused word these days, but children like the banter if it's done in the right way. And I think it's got to be done the right way.
Yeah. Well, from the comments we're going down the side.
All right.
All their people are enjoying this. Somebody obviously knows you from Edge Hill.
All right.
And said Paul was surrounded by kids at Edge Hill where Paul learned his trade.
Who said that then?
That's admin phone 2 to everyone.
Oh right. Okay. Right. Yeah. They'll know that. Tell me later on. But yes, there was a lot of kids at Edge Hill. I had a great time there.
Oh, good. Now we're coming towards the end. So, have you got a final poem for us?
I'll tell you what. I'll do today's poem.
Yeah.
So as I say,
today's that's good.
Yeah. So this is literally hot off the press, and it's because it's a new school year. So, Andy Camp, I've just seen it come up. Andy Camp, Andy Camp, one of my dearest and oldest friends, a man of whom I could say lots, but none of it is publishable. But Andy has been a great friend over him and his brother were actually they were ushers at when me and Sally got married. and we've kept in touch ever since. And Andy's been a great friend, especially this last year. But yeah, we played hockey and we're very childish together on many, many occasions. So he knows exactly what he's talking about. Anyway, yeah, so this is today's poem. And sometimes, like I said, the poems are my diary. Sometimes you respond to things that are happening. And obviously being in schools, I've been following teachers' Twitter feeds and stuff like that. They've been preparing, doing inset days. But, schools are starting back. So a brand new year. A year like no other year, a brand new year starts here. A journey that awaits and things may seem unclear. There may be trepidation, anxiety and fear. Teacher, pupil, old or young, the time is drawing near to open all the classroom doors to all that we hold dear. Embrace these new horizons, face each new frontier, cross each bridge together as challenges appear. Always be a helping hand and sympathetic ear. A year like no other year. A new school year starts here.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. Lovely to see you again. Hopefully I'll see you in the flesh, as it were.
Yes,
very
we're getting Pies and Peas up and running again this next year. So we'd love to have you back in Retford.
Well, both Pies and Peas are two of my faves.
Good, because that's how you're being paid.
Yeah, I don't mind being second on the bill to Pies and Peas, to be honest with you. So I want to thank. This is the end of the series. There's nobody next week, so you can all you can have a rest, stay in bed. But it's been great series, and it's been great to have Paul as my last guest. So I want to thank the Manchester Libraries for sorting this out and allowing us to do this. And to Flapjack Press and Paul Needs in particular, not only for sorting this out, but for all the work he does for all the poets, like Paul and myself, and all the poets that you've seen are Flapjack Press poets in Manchester. Do check them out. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to say a special thank you to Eva in Belgium, because it's lovely to have an international audience. So thank you, Eva, who follows us on Facebook and that as well, which is very nice. So both Paul and I and all the poets you've probably seen will be on Facebook and Twitter. So do get in touch and say hello, and swap poems and whatever. I'll just end now with a poem. This is the if I die now, Paul, this is my last published poem. Right, so this is my last book, Distance Between Clouds, and this is the last page of it. So I'm hoping to get another book out before I pop my clogs, but if I don't, this is my last published poem. It's called The Distance Between Clouds, so from the title. And thanks everybody, and I hope to see you again. Distance Between Clouds. I've very little I can say to you, my friend. I can only offer a gentle reminder to listen to your child. Look upon the face of the sea in all weathers. Put your arms around those you love. Very little, but everything. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.